this. If it's optional for you, let's say you're a parent, if it's optional for you, there's a high chance that it will not be important for your kids. If it's optional for you, if it's I don't know, I kind of feel like it, being engaged, I kind of feel like church today, or I got this thing that I'm going to go to over here. If it's not in, if church is we can edit that out. If church is optional for you, there's a high chance that it will not be important for your kids, that they might or might not know Jesus, that they will be unengaged as well. And then for your grandkids, there's a high chance that they will not know Jesus, that they will never be engaged, and that church won't even be considered. That puts the fear of God in me, to think that my grandkids, again, if it's just optional for me, there's a high chance that for my grandkids, it will not even be considered. And I think when we view that and we see that, it all of a sudden makes our decisions a lot more important. It's like, should it be optional? What am I modeling for my kids right now? That it's a backseat to everything else, that it's kind of only go when you want to go. Again, you might know Jesus, but there's a high chance that your kids and your grandkids might not ever be engaged in their relationship with God. So that's the first thought. The second thought that I had is oftentimes what I see in that kid and grandkid generation, what they love and appreciate, this is kind of the ironic thing, what they love and appreciate the most about the previous generations is the previous generation's relationship with Jesus and all the Jesus-like qualities from those previous generations. Yeah. Again, even though they're not engaged, they don't even consider it, what they love about grandma and grandpa is I know that they prayed for me. I know that grandma, she read her Bible every morning, and they just oozed the love of Jesus to me. So it's such an ironic thing that oftentimes those next generations, it's what they admire most about mom and dad and about grandma and grandpa. And then here's the third thing I was going to say. Here's the good news. At any point, you can be the generation that changes that. At any point, you can take those 4 generations and you can reset it as that first generation. You can go from being unengaged and not important to fully engaged in church as a priority. Or you can go literally starting today, this Sunday, you can go from being loosely engaged and church is optional. No, we're going to reset it for my kids and my grandkids. I'm going to reset that bar at fully engaged in church as a priority. Mm-hmm. And so those are just some thoughts that I have. I'd love to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah, do you think maybe it's obvious, but the critical point is from priority to optional? Because after you hit optional, you sort of see this cascade.
You do. I do, and I think there's many different factors that play into it. Fully engaged encompasses so much. Being in the Word, serving, forgiving people, prayer life. So that but the weekly worship, and I'm obviously biased. I'm a pastor, but I see that as being one of the leading indicators of that as well. Mm-hmm. And so that difference between priority and optional, engaged fully to loosely engaged, I do think that is the most critical juncture. Mm-hmm. And that's when we begin to lose our kids and we lose our grandkids. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this thing, back to that mom-dad generation, well, I know the Bible and I know the stories, but do your kids?
Yeah.
I know I can go to church anytime when I hit a rock bottom point in my marriage and my life. I know I can go to church, or I need to get I know I'm kind of drifting. I know I need to get back to God. Do your kids know that? Mm-hmm. I would probably say they don't. They've never seen it modeled. It's been an optional thing.
You learn something that you haven't passed on.
Yes.
Yeah, you learn something, but you haven't passed that on. That so much of my grandparents went to church. My parents went to church, and then when I went to college, I didn't at first go to church, but it was in the back of my brain all the time.
Yeah,
I should really get my butt back to church, And I was struggling in college too. It was I was kind of depressed a little bit because I was away from home and all this stuff. It's I should really get my butt back to church, and really that was a foundation my parents laid by just hey, we go to church. This is what we do, and it maybe even giving people permission. It's really okay if your kids don't want to go and you make them go.
Exactly. We make them go to the doctor. We make them go to school every day. Like I give you, and that sounds so old. And I also I would say this in all the most non-legalistic way. I think I'm definitely a grace-filled person,
Yeah.
and so I tend to lean heavily towards grace. I say this in the most non-legalistic way. My kids, they never want to go to school right now. My two middle ones, they would never go to school a day in their life. We don't give them the option. It's like, no, we're going. That's what we do. And again, you want to like I've talked in previous episodes. I have like 4 or 5 non-negotiables. One of them is going to church on Sunday. We're going. If we're in town and if we're not sick, we're going to church. The other one is youth. Like, hey, that's just whatever. And what's interesting is when it's set as a kind of a non-negotiable. Those two things, my kids never balk at church. They never balk at even going to youth, which is an awesome thing. But yeah, it's okay to lay that down, and I think we'll never ever regret it, you know, and so it's never too late to reset as that first generation.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. I think it's difficult to make it a priority nowadays.